Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Change Your Mind podcast. I'm your host, Chris Ashley. We explore the intersection between personal development, spirituality, and science. And I'm really excited. We have a Reiki teacher on our show today, but she goes so much more beyond what regular Reiki teachers do. And I'm really excited to dive into it. First, a couple quick announcements. Check out the links in my show notes where you're going to find a link to my book, Change Your Mind to Change Your Reality. You'll find some free downloads, my free masterclass that happens every few weeks, places to connect with me on social media, my courses, my coaching, lots of ways to get involved and be active in the community. All right. So with me today, I have Christine Renee. Christine Renee is a Reiki teacher, chakra coach, and shamanic Reiki practitioner and trainer living in Bozeman, Montana. By finding healing spiritually through the chakras and enhancing her Reiki sessions through shamanic practices, Christine was able to heal limiting beliefs in her career, relationships, self-worth, and more. Christine's passion is to spread Reiki healing throughout the world and loves offering chakra-based coaching so individuals can find their power from within. The founder of Reiki Cafe University, she mentors and trains Reiki practitioners in advanced skills in coaching and shamanic studies from around the world. Reiki Cafe University is a hub for Reiki practitioners who are willing to do the inner work to bring their Reiki dreams to reality. Christine loves sharing her wisdom through her podcast, Reiki Cafe Radio, which I was so honored to be a guest on just a couple of weeks ago. So welcome, Christine. I'm really excited you're here.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to dive into this conversation.
I am too. Like I was just saying when I was talking about you, you take it so much further than regular Reiki, which is also just amazing as it is, and dive into these shamanic practices. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about how you can even assist people during death. So I'm excited to get into it. But first, I like to start all of my episodes the same way, and that is by asking my guests, what is their origin story? What led you on this path? What made you want to do this? So please share your story with us.
Thanks for the opportunity. So I feel like I've always had a spiritual, eccentric part of my personality. I was always kind of tuned in as a child, and my dad was doing Reiki when I was a kid. And so some of my earliest memories are of him doing Reiki. And so, like, for example, my brother got hit by a car and lost his foot at a very young age. And my dad was oftentimes giving him Reiki. And I wasn't very included. It was such a quiet hush hush thing back in the 1980s of doing Reiki. And so I would press my ear up against the wall and door and try to hear what was going on in their sessions. And as many people will know, Reiki isn't audible for the most part. And in their sessions, I could actually hear the bone cracking and popping into place on my brother's knee, which was his like problematic area. So it was like those imprints in my mind and were ingrained in. I really feel like my dad seeded me with this potential of what is this Reiki? And it was something that wasn't really spoken about too often in our family. It was all kind of done behind closed doors. But when I became an adult, my first opportunity to learn Reiki, when I was reintroduced to it, I was like, oh yeah, I definitely want to go there. So it was something that happened really early on. And, I was very much spiritually aware as a child. Like, I was very much clairaudient, speaking with spirit at a very young age. And so when I stepped into the Reiki training at age 20, I was actually working at a birth center, training to be a midwife and practicing to learn how to catch babies and take care of mamas and help with breastfeeding. And my mentor in Reiki was teaching me how to talk to the spirit babies to help in the delivery process. So very unique background. And I really feel like Reiki has always been a part of my life. I was trained very early on, and then, life happens. I think none of us come here for an easy ride. We all have stuff. We all have difficult times in our life that we need to learn and process through. And so in my deepest, darkest moments, Reiki was always there with me to help me through it and overcome it. And in those instances, I remember, my quote unquote dark night of the soul, I really kind of said, okay, I'm done. I'm done with the struggle. I'm done with the arguing. I'm done with the trauma. I'm done with with just the battle with life in general. And so I quit my 9 to 5. I said, I'm doing Reiki and meditation and nothing else. And then my life really began, like like the page turned. And so it was at that point that I started really diving into the chakra healing work. I really wanted to understand why I was having the health problems I was, why I had been involved in relationships that I was involved in. Like, I really wanted to take it a step further. And so I not only was doing a lot of self-study, but I started offering shamanic guided meditations on the chakras. And in that process, every week I would dive into one chakra and see in my own life the reflections of what needed to be healed and what I needed to work on. And my business grew out of these shamanic guided meditations. So it was all this interweaving of the chakra information, of shamanic work, as well as Reiki. And I built my business from 2016 moving forward. And really, it's been a beautiful journey.
Thank you so much for sharing. First of all, I've had that dark night of the soul where I left my 9 to 5 and took that leap of faith. And it's amazing how things fall into place when you're following your passion and your purpose. And how cool that your dad was a Reiki practitioner. I didn't know that. It's like in your DNA, which is amazing. How did he feel about you becoming a practitioner yourself?
I think he lives vicariously through me in a way. Like, he's very proud of me. He's an entrepreneur himself. And so for me to be an entrepreneur and then really dive into all this Reiki stuff is great, because even like when back in the 80s, when he was only trained in level 1 and level 2. And so it was a matter of a handful of years ago that I was teaching Reiki classes and was teaching a master's, like, hey, Dad, do you want to take your master's? So I'm actually his Reiki master teacher. And it's a really fun dynamic. So like in the fall, back in the spring, I went to Japan for a Reiki pilgrimage, and my dad and I traveled to Japan together. So it's our own little bond that we have together that I feel like he knows that he feels very much like spirit worked through him to see me get to where I am through my Reiki business. And so he's probably a big cheerleader, a support person in my life. He might not listen to every podcast I have, but he will definitely, he shows up for me, and he wants to see me succeed and be well. And I just remember those pivotal points in my business where I was like, okay, well, I finally hit that 10K months, and my mom was always kind of figured this was just a hobby, and my dad's like, no, that's really good. This is like legit business at this point.
That's so amazing. That's so cool. I'm so happy for you that you had that. And it just makes me think, like, I believe that we choose our parents before we incarnate. And you definitely chose him for a reason. Like, he was meant to kind of open that path up for you.
Yes. Yeah.
Some
And
of us have
right.
parents that are the opposite. And like, that's the catalyst that we needed. Right.
Exactly.
So it all works
Absolutely.
out the way it's meant to.
I feel like he definitely has his own journey and his own spirit learnings. And I remember maybe 5 years ago, I was like, okay, Dad, I've been with you 7 lifetimes. 7 lifetimes I have come back and tried to teach you things. This is the last time. You're going to learn it this lifetime. We're going to do this together.
That's so cool that you could talk to him like that, though.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
My mom would be like, what the fuck did you just say to me?
Right. Yeah, for sure. We definitely have a special connection, and he's always open to hearing my ideas and looking at things differently, even if he doesn't agree with them. Like, he's still a very, typical boomer in a way. He was an engineer for most of his career. Right. So very typical, almost 70-year-old guy who's just like, yeah. Okay. Vortexes. Tell me about these things. So he's always very curious.
That's really cool. Those are such like different sides of your brain too, right? Like the spiritual intuitive versus like engineer is very logical. And awesome. So one other thing you said that really caught my attention was Spirit Babies. Have you read that book, Spirit Babies, by the way?
I have not.
Oh my gosh, it's amazing. It's all about the man who wrote it. I can't remember his name. He's since passed, but he was a medium, a psychic, and he connected with spirit babies who were either waiting to be born or like in the spirit realm, or were like kind of waiting around their parents during the birth. And it's just like an amazing book. Can you still talk to spirit babies?
Oh yeah, for sure. So I was in the birth world for about 5 years and then became a Reiki doula. And part of it, oftentimes I found that if I had mamas who were seeing me, I would be like, you should get 3 Reiki sessions before you go into labor, so that we can get your body, mind, spirit kind of in alignment to prepare for the birth. And in this way, oftentimes spirit babies would come in, they would talk to me. But most often it was in the labors where the spirit babies are just hanging out, watching. And I'm like, you need to get in your body. It's time to be on the physical side. You cannot be born unless you get in your body. So I'm kind of have to, I've been to numerous births where that's kind of the scenario. Mom's really struggling in labor, and she's and just an immense amount of pain. The majority of births I've been to have been natural, out of hospital births, and so these moms were really struggling, and so then I would take a step back and just scan the room, like, where's the spirit baby here now? Find their energy, connect with them, reassure them, like, this is okay. You don't need to be scared. Everything is going to go a lot smoother if you participate. And let's come on, like, come on in. And then it would be like rapid. Okay, now baby's being born.
That's so cool. And I don't know if I've told you this, but I'm 8.5 months pregnant. So that's why I'm like, let's talk about spirit babies for a moment, and then we
I
will get
love
to
it.
all the topics. But I've heard just from like reading like Dolores Cannon's work and other people's and the Spirit Babies book, that yeah, a lot of times they're not actually like in their body in the womb.
Mhm.
They can like hang out, watch the parents, they can go to the spirit realm, meet with their guides, learn lessons.
Absolutely.
But as long as they're there by that first breath, right?
Yes,
Like,
that's it. Like, come on, let's go.
yeah. Okay, so is there a way, like, let's say I'm in labor and I'm like, okay, this is taking a while. How do I connect with my spirit baby like during that moment?
I think for the mom who's going through such an immense amount of pain, this is why it's so lovely to have either your partner or a doula or someone who can be your spiritual attendant at that time.
Mm.
And if you know, like, something doesn't feel right, you can talk directly to your spirit baby and you can call out because they pay attention to that. Same thing with our guides, our angels, our spirit guides, they cannot intercede on our behalf without our free will permission. So just in any type of state of, I'm in dire need of support, going, yo, I need your help now. Like, help me now. Make this easier now. And same thing that with the spirit babies, you can call them forward. It's time to get in your body now. So oftentimes if babies aren't in their bodies at the time of birth and they're being born, that's when we need to resuscitate. That's when, like, and it's so much of it's like, get in your body right now. And you can see them just turn right around because they're making that choice to get in their physical container.
Yeah, that totally makes sense, because I've heard the same thing about the spirit guides before too, like exactly what you just said. They're there to help, but they're not going to help unless you ask for it, right?
Yeah.
Or they can't really intervene in any kind of way unless you're like an active participant in it.
Yeah.
Okay, amazing. So I just had to get that out of the way. I might ask you to talk to my spirit baby at the end of this episode, because I
Sounds
do
good.
actually really like when guests kind of give some sort of, I don't, demonstration's a terrible word for it, but I don't know. I've had like tarot readers do a little tarot reading. I've had human design people do a little design reading. So we might come back to that. Okay, but first, I want to talk about all the amazing other things you do. And one of them is shamanic Reiki, and that's not something I've really heard much about. So, can you just explain a little bit about like what that is, how it's different from, quote unquote regular Reiki, and
Yeah.
and what you do? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's first start off with, wait, what is Reiki? Because that's the foundation. So Reiki
Okay.
is this healing love and light energy that really helps you come into a state of relaxation, come into that state of your parasympathetic nervous system of rest, digest, relax, come into the peaceful state of mind, and just allow your body to heal. So Reiki in and of itself is amazing. I love it. It's part of foundation of my lifestyle. I incorporate it in everything that I do. Now, when we bring in the shamanic is really cool because it can work with the things that we need to release. Whereas Reiki really is just bringing in this powerful force of love energy, this divine, spiritually guided energy. Whereas the shamanic is going, what in you is actually causing the stagnation to begin with? What cords are there? What intrusive objects, energetic intrusive objects are blocking up your system? And really kind of diving into the shadow work behind all of those things. So this is why I love shamanic Reiki, because when you marry the two together, not only do we have this love and light energy force coming in, the shamanic part is helping you release. And then in that releasing, there becomes this vacuum. Well, if you're doing shamanic Reiki, the Reiki is going to fill that vacuum. It's going to fill that void so that you can really truly come into your balance, your aligned state of being, tap into your higher self, those types of things. And in the shamanic side, we can really start to dive into, why did those cords develop? Why do we have this intrusive object here? Where are those soul fragments that have been left behind in those traumatic events? And we do a lot of like shadow work and connection to understanding why our subconscious is holding us in these self-sabotaging behaviors and these repeated unhealthy patterns, our negative thought processes. All of that can be really taken the avenue of shamanic Reiki. We can really do some deep healing work.
So it's kind of like pulling weeds before planting seeds.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, which I totally stole from my functional medicine doctor friend. That's like what he always said.
I love that.
It just made me think of that. So what does a shamanic Reiki session look like? Like I've gotten Reiki treatments plenty of times, but never a shamanic Reiki.
So it can be a lot more talkative, a lot more communicative than compared to a regular Reiki session. And it can involve a lot more interaction from the client. So instead of just being like in a meditative state where you're practically taking a nap with a Reiki session, we're going to ask for your engagement. So we're going to feel into, do we need to have a shamanic journey this session? Meet your power animals, meet your spirit guides to receive messages, healing, and support in that way. Do we need to call in a universal power animal like Eagle, who can journey for us on our behalf to find soul fragments lost during those traumatic events of our past? So it's very fluid in the way that I can't say that any shamanic Reiki session is going to show up the same way twice, because it's so dynamic. We're going to feel into your energy and going, what needs to happen at this point in time? And oftentimes it depends on who shows up in the room. So if I have my archangel crew show up for a shamanic Reiki session, I'm like, oh, we're going to have that kind of session today. Meaning it might be very more on the intrusive entity removals, or I'm going to be doing soul fabric work and finding past lives or future timelines. So who my guides are, I'm as a shamanic practitioner, you develop your own spirit team. And so the people on your spirit team often show up for specific events that need to occur in the shamanic session, whether that's soul retrieval or soul fabric readings or intrusive entity removals. And so that kind of gives it away. Like if I have certain guys show up, I'm like, oh, I know what we're doing today, versus someone who's just like, I just want to meet my power animal and find out what my next steps on my healing path are. I'm like, great, we can do that. That's totally fine. And it's going to look very different than someone who is coming in complaining of a physical ailment, and that physical ailment is actually attached to an intrusive object that was thrown at them by an ex, for example.
So it's not necessarily their guides that come in. It could be these like universal guides that you work with a lot, or that you see come in for certain types of healing.
Yep, exactly. And sometimes their guides will show up. I've definitely met a lot of very interesting guardian angels and spirit guides that are coming in with a client. And oftentimes they'll be bringing in messages. And then oftentimes it's these other people on my spirit team that are there to really facilitate the session.
That's really cool. Okay, so you had two little phrases that I haven't heard before. So I'd love for you to, and I don't know if they're connected or not, but I'd love for you to teach me about them. One was soul fragments, and the other was soul fabric work. So can you talk about those a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start with soul fragments. So oftentimes, if we've had a traumatic event happen in our life, part of us dies in that experience. Part of us is lost. So our soul in that traumatic event wants to escape the trauma. We disassociate. we see this all the time. And in that dissociation, we leave part of our soul in that event or attached to that person who has basically stolen our energy. And so we've lost a part of ourselves from that event. Think of, for example, like a rape. Part of myself died during that experience. Part of myself was lost during that experience. But our soul is still missing those pieces in our today state. We need to heal from that event and collect those soul fragments back so that we can be unified, whole and healthy and healed in our current soul. So oftentimes the soul retrievals are finding all of those soul fragments from all of those past traumas to help you feel whole and complete again and to really do the deeper healing work. Oftentimes those soul fragments, we have to encourage them like, I'm in a better place now. It's safe to return. I want you to be back. I want all of my pieces to be healthy and whole. And in that way, on the conscious level, we're recognizing what happened, who did this, and doing some forgiveness work and some healing work so that we can say, no longer does that past event have any influence over my actions and decisions of today. So there's a lot of background healing going on, if you will, to really allow the person to feel like they're in their full empowerment, that that event isn't going to recur and repeat, and no longer do I need to live in fear.
Super interesting. So is it once you call out those fragments back, the healing is facilitated, or do you have to heal in order for the fragments to come back? Or is it like a chicken and an egg thing?
It's kind of a chicken and an egg thing, depending on where you are in your healing journey.
Okay.
Sometimes if people come in for a shamanic Reiki session and they've done a couple of sessions, oftentimes just recognizing that they've lost themselves in that event there, and that is what has contributed to their current unhealthy behaviors. By healing that, by collecting it back, by letting that soul fragment return, you're doing all of it. You're healing from it, and no longer those patterns need to be repeated because you're no longer willing to give your power away to the event. You're collecting your power back.
That makes sense. So how do you know that you've lost fragments of your soul? Is it that you have these unhealthy behaviors and you're repeating patterns, or is it they have to go to someone like you and you kind of recognize it?
I think it's a bit of a combination. Sometimes I can see it. Oftentimes it's not me seeing it. It's that I have these spirit guides or power animals that show up and are like, and we're going to do this type of session today. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm really there to hold the space, hold the container for whatever healing work needs to be done. Oftentimes it's cords. And then, so we're cutting the cords as well as doing the soul fragment healing work by doing the soul retrieval. And it's like a combination of a lot of these different techniques. And we want the client to fully participate because once again, we have that free will. If we don't want to heal, if we want to remain a victim, we will stay a victim. So if we need to kind of heal those layers to be able to go, I'm ready to be in my full empowerment and I no longer want to use these victimhood stories as an excuse, then we're ready for healing. Because otherwise those soul fragments are going to fragment again and those cords are going to reattach again, right? We have to come into the state of no longer am I letting my areas of my past and the people of my past to dictate who I am today. I am who I am and I'm taking full responsibility in my healing.
It's so interesting that you brought up feeling like a victim, that it's a choice, that we let these stories that we create around the past kind of control our life, because it has just been this reoccurring theme on this show and in my work over and over again. And it shows up with so many different types of guests, people who, you know, are energetic healers such as yourself, to, you know, people who are doctors, to, you know, it's like it spans the whole spectrum. And you know, it goes back to like, you can't heal someone that doesn't want to be healed, first of all. And second of all, like, I don't know, there's just this trend going on, even especially with social media, I think, where you get these perceived payoffs from being a victim. So people fall into this victimhood, right? And like you're nodding, like you get it. So many people see it, and you know, but these payoffs are all perceived, right? It's like you get pity, you get, you know, attention, you get to like be the martyr, you get to not feel guilty, you get to not take responsibility or accountability. But you're also not taking steps towards your healing, and you're not feeling empowered in any kind of way, right?
Right. Yeah. You're stuck in a state of survival instead of
Yeah.
thriving.
Yeah.
Right. And so when we can say, it wasn't my fault, but it is my responsibility to heal, so it doesn't dictate my life moving forward.
Yeah.
And that's where we get a shift.
Yeah. Because there is a lot of placing blame on others that happens,
Mhm.
right? And it's like,
Exactly.
sure, the things that happen to you aren't your fault, like you said, but your healing is your responsibility. But also on this, and I would never blame a victim, but also on this spiritual like plane of it, I believe that we choose the big life circumstances that we're going to go through before we incarnate, because it's what gives us that opportunity to grow and level up and heal. And healing is always a choice. And it's that's not to say it's easy. This work
Right.
is really difficult. But you always have a choice.
Yeah. And you'll be stuck in those vibrational patterns to repeat those scenarios again and again and again and again until you learn the lesson. So we can use shamanic Reiki to put a spotlight on, here's another angle to look at this from. And now it's your choice to heal it. Look, there's an energetic cord between that occurrence of that, the person you felt victim by, and you have the choice to cut that cord, to say, no longer do I give that person my power. And in that way, we're stopping the story. We're no longer going to vibrationally um, be involvement with them. And so there's different ways we can even cut the cord so that they don't retaliate. How oftentimes do you hear about cord cuttings, and it's with a current partner or a recent ex-husband or something, and you cut the cord and then they retaliate because they're so used to draining your energy. These energetic vampires are pulling your energy. And so there's other ways we can do it that are gentler, that they're still getting what they need, but not from you.
Totally. And it totally makes sense what you're saying, cutting the cord, because on an energetic level, when you're retelling your story and you're in victim mode and you're thinking about that event again and again, and you're having this anger towards this person and this resentment, like, of course you're giving your energy away.
Exactly. And all
Well,
their time and attention, everything.
yeah. But it's interesting that you said like energy vampires, because I absolutely believe those types of people exist. But also, that other person might not be thinking about you at all.
Right.
Right? Like the situation that you went through together, they might have perceived as not harmful, right? Like this doesn't even have to be like some big trauma, like maybe you had a falling out, or maybe, whatever, like something just not as big. And maybe they're not thinking about you at all. They've moved on with their life, but you are so stuck in your story that you're just giving away your energy constantly.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, super interesting. Okay. So what about soul fabric work? What is that?
Yeah. So soul fabric is something that I've been practicing for years. And until recently, probably about a year ago, did I realize that, oh, other practitioners don't do this? That doesn't make any sense to me. So soul fabric is where you can reveal the fabric of the soul from the body and just lift it out so that it can reveal where energetic charges are on the fabric. And so each thread of the fabric is representative of a past life, a future life, the current life, or celestial life. And in this way, the intersections oftentimes have energetic charges from past lives that are triggering you in this lifetime and this day and age where it's influencing you. So even though, like, for example, this might, for all of the energy healers who are listening, the witch's wound is a really common one to think about. Like, okay, I was hung in that past life and I was killed in this past life. Anytime that I try to do my healing work, I died. Like, I was a midwife in my past life. And that's why it was so easy and natural for me to step into it at the age of 20. And I was killed because I was, doing witches. I was a witch, quote unquote, a witch. Right. And so those past lives are influencing this timeline. And so we can recognize that lifetime is done and rescript the past life. This is really cool work. When we get into past life work, how can we rewrite the story so that end doesn't happen the way it did, so that the energetic field can shift, so that it doesn't influence your current lifetime, with that negative energy. Are you
I'm gonna
following?
rewrite this story. Oh yeah,
So,
I'm like
okay,
I
you're on it?
forgot about past lives. I've had a couple of past life regressions. I'm with you.
Okay, good.
But
So
I've never heard it referred to as like lifting the fabric of a soul out and like talking about it as like
in
this
it,
tapestry, which is
tangible
really,
thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
super interesting.
Yeah. So the first time that happened, and then I'll come back to the rewriting.
Sure.
So the first time I saw that, it was with a really young child. She was about 4 years old, and was doing a distance Reiki session for her, and I had my 4 primary archangels show up, and I was like, "Oh, this is going to be a big session." The reason why the mother booked the session is because she had spent years, ever since she could talk, she would be having these nightmares going, how do I get my soul out? How do I get my soul out? How did she even know those words? So she had a past life curse, and she made a quote unquote like a deal with the devil and her perception, past life, and they were still coming for her soul. So she always had these demonic energies around her.
Poor
And
baby.
poor baby, I'm like, she was young. Like, this was something clearly that wasn't a trauma that happened in this lifetime. And so I saw Archangel Raphael lift the soul fabric out, find the timeline where that traumatic event, where that deal occurred, where that curse was, and be able to remove it, replace it with the light energy, and then send that cursed lifetime energy back to where it belonged. It like broke the contract. And so it was this really beautiful healing. The soul fabric was gently placed back into her little body, and no longer was she like a magnet to all of this negative entities.
Wow.
And so that was like the first time I saw it. And now it's like, it's fairly easy for me to come into a state with someone and go, oh, this isn't just this lifetime. Because oftentimes you see the chakras, this is the current lifetime. We're going to read the current chakras, what's going on here. And then oftentimes you're pulled off to the sides of going, oh, there's something else going on. This came from a past lifetime or a future lifetime, where you can, just like we're in this very multi-dimensional universe, where if we can tune into a timeline that we want to jump into, it has the desired reality. We can pull it in and imprint it on our current timeline to bring that energy into this lifetime. So there's very cool things we can do with soul fabric. That's what I teach in our advanced shamanic training.
So can I just ask, do you do it yourself, or do you let your guides or your angels come in and do the work?
It's a little bit of both. It depends on who's kind of initiating it. Sometimes they're like, get out of the way, let me do it. And I'm like, okay, I'm just standing back and I'm going to watch you guys and you're going to tell me the things. And then other times it's very much like, okay, let's lift it out. I'll still call in Archangel Raphael and some of my other guides to help lift out the soul fabric. And then they're pointing where I need to, what's priority, what needs to be healed, how much can the client handle. So oftentimes I can pull out a soul fabric and it's a messy tapestry, right? Like there's snags, there's all kinds of things going on, going, how much can this client handle in one session? Let's just heal one part of it. And then there's other clients that are like, oh, we're just going to, recraft this a little bit so it's a little smoother. And so those pieces can be very organically worked on in alignment with spirit, in alignment with guides, in alignment with power animals, whoever wants to show up for that healing work.
It's really interesting. I don't know if you're familiar with Dolores Cannon's work, but I love her stuff. But she talks about how there's a tapestry room on the other side of the veil, and the tapestry is for all lives of all souls. So it's like this massive tapestry, and like we each have a thread, and everyone's thread looks different and it's woven through. So it's just really cool to connect that with like, oh, but we also have our own tapestry as a
Yeah.
soul too. I don't know.
Yes.
I love when
Yes.
things happen like that, where you're like, wait, that connects back to this other thing, and it's just like
Yeah.
it all comes together.
Well, and it's very cool to see those threads. Our main thread go up to like our soul memory, like all of our learned lessons from every single timeline we can tap into that way. And then that line enters into the soul fabric of the universe, which is exactly what you're talking about. So very cool.
So when we're rewriting the story of a past life, we're not like actually changing the story. It's more like we're cutting that energetic tie to this life so that it's not affecting us in a negative way, right? It's like
Correct.
breaking a contract, like you said.
Exactly. So if, for example, we'll go back to I was killed as a midwife, right? So here I am in the past life, and there was someone in the community that's calling me out as a witch, and I get led to the magistrate, I get hung. That's the past life story. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back to the point on the timeline before the death occurred, before the trauma occurred. So I can rewrite the story of how I would like it to go instead. So I'd like it to go instead that I show up at the magistrate and the community all defends me. There are people there who had twins and all of these different birth stories that they're all announcing like, no, she's needed in our community. We love her. Do not take her, like all of these things. So we can start rewriting the story the way we wish it would have gone. And that in that way, we're energetically cutting that influence into our current timeline. And so if we get triggered by the witch's wound, we're going to instead go back to our made up, rewritten story of going, remember, no, everyone loves me. I'm worthy to do my work. I'm worthy to use my voice, and I help people. And that's the story. So it helps you consciously not allow those subconscious threads to influence you. And in that way, we're putting a stop, we're putting a roadblock of going, just because we all have negative. I mean, the past in general was such a dark and scary place with all the wars, the famines, the just everything. And so we can figure out which lifetimes are really holding significant trauma and bringing it into light of going, we don't have to actually let those things influence our current timeline. We live in a new day and a new dawn and a new era as we enter into, quote unquote, the age of Aquarius, or however you want to feel about it. Like, we no longer have to worry about being killed for doing midwifery work. And so I think that's yeah.
No, go ahead.
So that's why in this lifetime, I feel like I had a very short stint of midwifery in my adulthood. Like, I was doing it for about 5 years, and it was just to prove like I can do this and I'm not going to be killed. And then it was like, oh, soul assignment, agreed, done, time to move on.
Yeah, I can see how that would be really healing for you. And I feel like this is such a great exercise, even not going to past lives, even with this life.
Exactly.
Like, we were just talking about like how sometimes we have this story that we just tell ourselves, like, what if you just rewrote that story in your mind and then you could just let it go, right? And you can
Exactly.
let those people that are involved go and you can move forward. So it's really,
Yeah.
really, really cool. And the past life stuff is so real. Like, I know I keep bringing up Dolores Cannon, but like I've had several QHHT sessions. Like, it took my husband and I 7 years to get pregnant, and I went and got a past life regression. And I had had a son who had been killed, and I made this vow that I would never have children again. And then I didn't have children for like several lifetimes, and I had to like break that vow. And it was literally like this stone inside of me that I was like, my higher self was helping me just like kind of like demolish, and it crumbled, and then we got pregnant pretty soon after. So,
Yeah.
it's real stuff.
Chills, like it's real stuff. And I think we don't always recognize if we have health issues that they have a past life connection. And oftentimes I like to bring people through their current lifetime stuff first, their inner childhood trauma. Let's heal the inner child. Let's connect with them. And then oftentimes the next layer is let's go to past lives. Let's go to future timelines. Let's heal all of these different aspects of who we are that show up on the soul fabric so that we can be in a state of health and healing and wholeness and can invite joy and love and serenity and peace into our world, because most lifetimes don't hold that for us.
So it's interesting you said future timelines. So do future timelines affect our current timeline as well? And I know that if we're getting like really into it, the time isn't even linear, right? Like, all
It's
timelines
not.
are happening simultaneously. Like,
Exactly.
no such thing as past lives, it's parallel lives. So just talk to me for a moment about that. Like, how do current timelines play into this? Or pardon, future timelines.
Yeah. So, just like you said, all the timelines are happening right now, whether they're past life or future lives. Like, time doesn't exist. Time is an illusion. And so when we can know this, we can also feel into the parallel timelines, this parallel universe of all the opportunities, all the potential. And what we're doing there is we're recognizing what is it that we desire in our life? What's our desired reality? If we can wave the magic wand and have what we want, what does it include? And then we can tune into that timeline that has all of those attributes that you're hoping for this lifetime. And when we can, and so in the soul fabric, it feels like all of these vertical threads are tuning into those parallel timelines. And what we're doing is going, this is the timeline that I would really love to experience. And we're just going to fold it over and bring it into the current timeline.
It's like quantum jumping.
Exactly. It
Yeah.
is totally quantum jumping. It's just,
Yeah.
here's the framework of how to see it. And I think that's what makes, our advanced shamanic Reiki training unique, is that we're really going, this isn't, I think it's hard to like do a training in this way without some kind of lens. Like we need to come up with a story that makes sense to our mind so that we can do the quantum work.
Yeah, I mean, it totally makes sense, because otherwise it's so far out there and hard to wrap your head around. And yeah, I always when I teach it, I like give the metaphor of like tree branches, because it's like, again, you need something tangible to latch
Tangible.
onto for your mind. So that totally makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Um, and I know we've already been talking for 45 minutes, which is just wild to me. I want to pivot and talk a little bit about death, because, death is a topic that I've personally like dove into a lot. And people think it's morbid or are afraid of death, but it's just passing through a doorway, right?
Yeah.
I lost my dog and my father within the last like year and a half, and so I like really really dove into all this work, and near death experience stories and share death experience stories, and I had a share death experience. So I know that you told me before when we talked that you can talk to people's higher selves while working with death. You can help open people's chakras to help them cross over. So I'd love for you to just talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely. So I'm if you haven't noticed, I really like working with the thinning of the veils, like birth and death. Like I love these spaces because I feel like you're more likely to be vulnerable in those spaces. You're more likely to be real, and you're more likely to tune into what your soul needs
Mm.
versus what the human body needs. And so in working with death, I too had a lot of people crossing over in my life in a very short amount of time, grandparents and friends of the family and that type of thing. And I'm the person in the family, like if something bad is going on, call Christine. Like that's kind of my role in the family, is like if something's up, call Christine and she'll help. And so what my uncle, he had Alzheimer's and he wasn't in his body for years. But I could tune into him and talk to him. Like he was just hanging out. He was tethered to his body, but he was hanging out above his body.
Mm.
And that way I could communicate and like, what do you need? What do you, are you done? Are you ready to let go of this physical experience? Like, and what messages do you have that you want me to translate for the family? Like, what is it that you need? And so I've had those experiences often, and that's and helping my uncle, I had I had the incarnation of death show up, and he basically brought me on as his apprentice. He was like, I'm going to teach you all of the things. And so I was like, great. Okay. And tends to be like a pattern in my life. If spirit wants me to learn something, I'll have numerous events back to back, and I'll have a guide show up to be like, I'm going to teach you how to do this so that you can go on and teach others. So the incarnation of death is working with me, and he's showing me how to spin the chakras to help the soul fabric release from the body and just cut the cords between the soul fabric and the body so that it doesn't have to be tethered any longer. So often it's the physical body that's holding on to the soul because that's its job, right? The soul, the physical body wants to survive. And oftentimes we're taught that death is scary and death is hard and death is bad, that we're scared to let go. And
Mm.
so when we can work with folks who are on hospice at the closing at the end, it's helping their body to recognize, you've done a great job. I'm really appreciative. Have full of gratitude for the life that you've been able to give me, and your work here is done. The soul is ready to release, and let's let the soul go now. And so there's different shamanic Reiki tricks that we can help support that in the process while we're talking to the soul, while we're talking to that higher self of going, what is it that you need? What's going to help you feel connected and ready to release? And so, like when my grandfather was in his dying process, I remember my parents calling me up and going, does he want his death rites read by a priest? We were all Catholic. And he was like, and so I tuned into my grandpa and he's like, nope, I don't need a priest, but I want the rosary read. Like, anyone in the family know how to do that?
You're like, that's
Like,
not my job.
yeah, right. I was like, play it. Just turn on the Catholic radio. They have the Rosary Hour. Just play it. That's what he wants. And so oftentimes in the end, we're no longer verbal, but our soul is still very vibrant and very real and very there. And so how can we support the soul and receiving anything that it needs so that any unfinished business can be released and cleared away so that they're ready to go and enter into a new field, a new form, and feel supported in that.
Yeah, that's super interesting because I was gonna ask you, like, in a case like Alzheimer's where the person still has that silver cord attached to their body, is it like, so often we hear like you don't die until you're ready, right? And then once you die, it's because you've done everything you need to do in this lifetime, or you've like learned the lessons, you've served your purpose, or whatever it is. Like, is it ever that like there's still something they need to do? Like in your uncle's case, maybe he was hanging around because he had to teach you that. But it's also really interesting that like the body's holding on. I've never heard that. I've always heard like the soul is holding on because there's unfinished business, never the body. But
It can go either
yeah,
way.
makes sense. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. And, for my uncle, his purpose, he had a very long Alzheimer process because his soul contract, his soul agreement was to teach his wife patience,
Mm,
unconditional love, forgiveness. And he needed to be in the form of Alzheimer's to be able to teach that lesson. So
yeah.
oftentimes it's about the soul family that we come in with and lessons both ways. So his learnings might have been complete, but he agreed to have this very difficult end to his life, 5 years with Alzheimer's, where his body was basically a vegetable close to the end, and to teach the people in his life
Yeah.
certain values, certain lessons, right? So even my grandfather, he's like, I'm done. I don't know why I'm not dying. Like, I should be dead by now. Like, he's vocalizing this, like he's done. But his daughter still had unfinished business. She was still working through her emotions around his dying process. So he was on hospice for, I mean, they thought it was going to be weeks, maybe days, and he hung around for 3-4 months. Right. And so, because the daughter wasn't ready to let him go yet. And so energetically on the soul level, he was waiting for the daughter to be ready.
Yeah. That totally makes sense. Um, that's really interesting. Yeah. You just have me thinking like my dad, he got COVID in 2020. He was one of the first cases. Do you remember when there was that cruise ship that was like docked off of
Yes.
California? It was, yeah. So my parents were on that. He got COVID. He was sent to they put them in like quarantine in a military base in San Diego because they were like some of the first cases. The doctors told me like he's got days, if not hours, left to live. Say goodbye. Said goodbye over FaceTime. He lived for 3 more years, but like because of COVID, he got strokes. He couldn't eat. Like
Mm,
there was all this stuff. And then he was in hospice for 9 months and he was like so ready to die. Like
yeah, I'm
he was like
done.
ready to die. Like he was like ready to die when he was in the ICU in 2020. And it just makes me think like what were the reasons, because there's always a reason,
Exactly.
but it's interesting to think about. Because I always thought about it from the point of view of well, I guess not. I guess I even write in my book what you were just saying, that like sometimes it's for the lesson of the family too.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting.
And so these
That makes
types
sense.
of, you can do really cool like shamanic journeys to like, what was the lesson of this? Who still needs to learn?
Hmm.
So that in the soul family aspect, if we can learn our lessons, then we can release of the attachment. So oftentimes there's some type of attachment going on still. And those energetic cords that we were just about, they can tether you to this earthly state, this earthly plane, right? That's the unfinished business. I need to ask for forgiveness for my kid. I need, all of these things. Oftentimes those cords are tethering you to this physical experience. And so it's this full acceptance of, I'm ready to release and let go of any attachment I have. And everyone like, and so in that process, you're basically saying it's your journey now. It's you have to learn how to love and accept and release and forgive and all of the things that you need to do in your lifetime. And my job here is done.
So it's not even necessarily that like they get that forgiveness or they give that forgiveness. It's more of like being able to let go and detach from it.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah. I think looking at things from the point of attachment, it's very interesting. And I learned a lot about this from the aspect of Reiki, because Reiki comes from a very Buddhist background. And so in Japan, it's all about non-attachment, 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 and coming to a state of non-duality. Like, you're just here now. Everything else is attachment. What you smell, what you see, what you hear, what you smell, all of that's attachment. And so if you want to get to your true soul essence, release attachment. What does that look like? And so in that work of just even exploring, what am I attached to? Am I attached to this house, this car, this child, this whatever it is? Those are all energetic cords in a way. Not negative. We can have positive cords too. And I think that's what people oftentimes forget. We can have a love cord, heart chakra to heart chakra, that's very positive and influential and loving and supportive. And then we can have other cords as well. And so even those love cords from a quote unquote shamanic point of view, they're holding you into attachment. They're tethering you here.
Yeah, I mean, and that's like such a crazy hole to go down. Like thinking about what it would be like to not be attached to anything.
Mhm.
I mean, part of me is like, well, the human experience is involved getting attached to things, right? Like
Right,
we're
totally.
here to interact with each other and have emotions and learn and grow, and like the way that this whole earth school is set up is so that we can learn and grow, right? And I think
Which
part
is
of
why I'm not a Buddhist, right?
yeah, no, I mean
Yeah.
it's just, but it's like if you're truly unattached to anything, it's like why even be here? Like why
Mhm.
not just stay on the other side? It's actually like, so my brother-in-law is like total Buddhist. Like he actually spends months every year in the Himalayas, like way up in the Himalayas,
Mhm.
meditating with these monks. And he like meditates like 5 hours a day. And I've had these conversations with like my in-laws and my husband about it. Like, it's like, well, at some point, like, don't you need to like also like live your life too?
Right.
Like is like, I don't know, trying to attain enlightenment or whatever it is, like we're already that on the other side. But
Yep.
your soul chose to come here and be a human for a reason, right? Like I don't
Mhm.
know, it's really fascinating to think about.
And it's like, to flip it on the other side, why are you so attached to what he's doing?
Yeah. Yeah,
You
yeah.
know what I mean? Like, it's such an interesting thing. And I think oftentimes, like, I'm on the same page with you. Like, I'm here for a mission and purpose. I came here to to share my light with as many people as possible, to help practitioners really come into their alignment, to release, to heal, so that they can do their good work. And then there's going to be this beautiful ripple effect as we move into this new age. And I recognize, like, I get frustrated because a lot of traditional Reiki practitioners really are all about releasing this attachment, coming into a state of satori. And I'm like, that's a really lovely and beautiful every once in a while. And I have a purpose. I've got work to do, and I'm going to do it because I'm just going to be sent back. My daughter, she's got a lot of anxiety, so she's like, you can't die before I do. I go, sweetie, they're not going to take me out right now because they know I have too much work to do. And I just wasted 40 years. If I'm going to leave, I'm just going to have to come back and do it all over again. Like, they
Yeah.
know that, like, that's not happening. And so I try to put it in that frame of mind, like, no, I'm here. I'm here now. I'm in this physical body. I was chosen for this time. I chose this time. This is the perfect scenario. I had the perfect past. The negative, emotionally abusive husband I had, he was there for a purpose. This past relationship I had, it was there for a purpose. Like, everything was set up to bring me to this time and place to do this work. And I'm not abandoning ship.
and your past life as like a healer, when you tried to be a healer and it got
Mhm.
cut short, like
Yes.
all served towards this purpose too, right?
Yes. Yeah. I'm like, I
It's
don't know how
so
many lifetimes I've had where I've been killed, right?
yeah, and it makes sense like when you're saying like, no, I have a job to do, like it totally makes sense, like given your past life. You're like, no, I'm here this time. It's not gonna get screwed up. Like I'm on a mission. And it makes me think a lot of like, this podcast explores, I say in the intro, like personal development, spirituality, and science. And I think they fit really well together. There is that intersection, but there's also that dynamic of like spirituality versus personal development, right? Like where
Mhm.
we're actively trying to like, grow and better ourselves, but spirituality is like, well, you're already perfect, right? So it's I don't know, or it's just like an interesting play, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. It's been an hour. Crazy. I feel like we could have kept going. But I won't take up any more of your time. So please let listeners know how they can work with you. Do you work with people over Zoom? What are your offers? Where can they find you? All the things.
I love it. You can find me at ReikiCafeUniversity.com. And then I'm on all of the platforms basically under the hashtag or the handle Reiki Cafe University. Um, my favorite and newest offering is the Soul Rising Shamanic Reiki. And this is where we bring people into a 4-month program and they can learn how to shamanic journey as well as learn the basics of Reiki and do that inner healing work to really release any of the childhood wounds that we have picked up along the way, anything that's been holding us back that we still haven't processed through yet, with a group cohort that's all doing that work. And so this is really going through the first 3 chakras of feeling safe, feeling creative and sacred, and really coming into our personal empowerment. So this is your shifting from that victimhood and into empowerment. And so I'm really excited to offer this. We're going to be starting February 10th. And so if you're interested, if you want to learn more, reach out to me on Facebook Messenger. You can find me under Christine Renee or go to Reiki Cafe University. But I'm really looking forward to this. We've taught a lot of shamanic Reiki programs, and this one feels so good, so juicy, and I'm really ready for spring.
Sounds amazing. And again, the links are always in the show notes. So if someone didn't, I don't know why my light went so dark. There we go. If you didn't get to write it down, come back, check out the show notes, and yeah, please like, comment, share, subscribe if this resonated. If there's someone you think would really benefit from it, share it with them. Help spread the good word. And thank you, Christine, for coming on. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And I'll see you next time. Have a beautiful rest of your day.